Thank you, and welcome to the Planning North Committee meeting. The first item I have to deal with, as we do not have the Chair and Vice Chair of this meeting available this evening, I then have to elect a Chair of this committee, and I'd like to propose myself for that role. Do I have a seconder? Okay, thank you. All those in favour? Agreed. Thank you. The sandwiches obviously work. Thank you very much. Okay, before we move to item 1, I'd like to welcome the speakers we have this evening. And may I remind you, this is a meeting at which the public are present, although it is not a public meeting. We have a significant number of speakers this evening. May I request that you stick to your allotted time. We will be timing you, and although I won't stick to the last nanosecond, I will be conscious if you do go over your allotted time. We're not expecting a fire drill today, so should you hear the alarm, please make your way to the nearest fire exits. There's one just over there, one there, and I believe we meet by the bandstand in almost the centre of Horsham. Members and members of the public, could I ask that you switch your phones to silent, or better still, switch them off. And when you are voting, please could you make sure your hands are clearly visible to the officer, so we get an accurate count of how people have voted. Before we start the agenda of the meeting, could I ask the officers to introduce themselves?
Good evening, I'm Adrian Smith, Major Applications Team Leader.
Amanda Wilkes, Senior Planner.
Good evening, Emma Parks, the Head of Development and Building Control.
Claire Brown, Principal Planning Solicitor.
And Liz Fennick, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you very much. And could I just remind you, when using you're making your speech, could you make sure that your microphone is switched on, and when finished, could you turn it off? Thank you very much. Agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, we've received apologies from Peter van der Boer, Councillor Tony Bevis, Councillor James Brooks, Councillor Ruth Fletcher, Councillor Anthony Frankland, Councillor Liz Kitchen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Can I take these as an accurate reflection of the meeting? All those in favour agree? Agreed. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Hogben, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of order, Chair. I'm finding you very quiet. You were slightly quieter than all the other planning officers, so I don't know if everyone at the back of the room can hear. If anyone is struggling to hear it, no, it looks like... Thank you, Chair.
Sorry,
I can ask you to speak as loudly as possible, and possibly I did see Max from IT in the room. If he's still around. Sorry, I did interest to declare. I know one of the speakers personally on item 8, Fields Place, and I do have an acquaintance in Chris Equi in number 10. Thank you. They're both personal interests, non-prejudicial, and no pecuniary interests.
Thank you. Can you hear me now? How about that? No? Good as it gets, okay. I'll have to remember I'm watching TV and I'm watching Question Time on a Thursday evening, and I'm shouting at the telly, so apologies for that. I'll try and speak up. Okay, sorry. More apologies, yes, I'm moving ahead myself.
Right. A declaration of interest in item 11, TPO 1566. 2 signatories of the letter of support for the TPO. I know them through my boyfriend. I've met them socially once, and I've been advised by legal that I can participate in the discussion and the vote. Can hear it.
We just have to work through this.
Yeah, so we'll get in touch with IT to find out, but in the meantime, if just people can sort of speak clearly and loudly, it'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Mr. Declaration of interest in respect to item 9, DC 232234. I have close friends, including the godparents to my son, who live in Forest Grange, but this won't preclude me.
Okay, so will you be participating in the item?
No, I won't.
Okay, so you'll leave the room?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Declarations of interest? No? Okay. Moving on to the first item. Item number 5, appeals. Any comments on the appeals? No? Okay, thank you. I missed the announcements, I do apologise. There's no announcements from Chief Exec, but I just bring your attention to the fact that item number 6, DC 23-1133, the Highways Depot, has been withdrawn from tonight's agenda. Okay, moving on to item number 7, which is DC 21-1215, Field Place Estate, Byfleets Lane, Broadbridge Heath. Could I ask the officer to present the application to committee?
The application for Field Place Estate, DC 21-1235. The 2021 application originally sought permission, which was predominantly retrospective, for the creation of an access and field gates onto Old Guildford Road West and works to Lake 4, as well as earthworks to Lakefield, including the importation and deposit of soil and chalk. The reprofiling of the land in Lakefield has been completed and works to Lake 4 are mostly completed. The proposals included the retention of a gated vehicular access constructed off of Old Guildford Road West, which includes a formal bell mouth and a narrow track extending into the field. The details of the proposal include raising the land across the field by approximately 2 metres, involving the deposit of imported mixture of topsoil and chalk on top of the heavy clay subsoil, and the relaying of the original topsoil mixed with some chalk over the whole of the field. Works carried out have been done to improve fertility and increase water retention in Lakefield, to provide ample water for the plants growing there, and also to contribute to water management and flood protection to slow and reduce the flow from the field into Lake 4. The 4 existing trees in Lakefield, 2 oaks and 2 maples, are retained. The proposals included planting of a large number of tree seedlings from elsewhere on the estate to provide shelter and sustenance for the cattle in future years and to enhance the beauty of the lake in Lakefield. Works that are still outstanding included the formation of a silt sump and reed filter bed adjacent to Lake 4. It is advised the applicant has no further track movements are required to complete the works, that these are mostly been completed. The estate comprises some 73 hectares of agricultural grassland supporting a herd of 80 to 125 winter park breed cattle and a flock of 20 to 50 ewes. The site comprises an undulating landscape, and the application site itself covers an area of 4.3 hectares.
Excuse me, please. It's so hard to hear. I mean, you can't see the person's mouth. I can't hear what they're saying.
So that's the application site. Actually, that sounds better, doesn't it? I can hear that already. That's the application site outlined in red. To the north, within the wider site boundaries of Field Place Estate, is a Grade 1 listed building. That's highlighted in yellow. And there's an access track that passes the dwelling and the matrix of fields and field boundaries associated with Field Place Estate and beyond. To the south is Lawson Hunt Industrial Estate and Broadbridge Heath built up area boundary. To the east are Lakes 2 and 3 and the matrix of fields and field boundaries within the wider landscape. To the west, there's a matrix of fields and field boundaries within the wider countryside and sporadic dwellings, including Fairlands, Fairfield Stud and Trusslands Farm. The site is identified as being located within Flood Zone 1, a low river flood risk. The Environment Agency mapping system shows the areas of land at the lowest and highest risk of flooding from the River Arun and Brunswick Stream. The Environment Agency mapping system indicates that the closest area of land at risk of flooding is to the west of the application site at Trusslands Farm. The mapping system also shows the areas of land most at risk from surface water flooding in Lake 4 in the northern part of the application site, with areas of low medium risk lie to the east of the site. It's advised that the site is not at risk from reservoir flooding or groundwater flooding. This is a bird's eye view of the site and the area of the new lake, which is within the northeast boundary of the site area. You can see a belt of trees there up in that northeast boundary, and that's where the Lake 4 will be. If I move on, you can see that area hatched in blue, the new Lake 4, and the extent of Lake Field, and also the proposed, well, the access and the gates that are proposed. So this shows the existing gates and the access into Field Place Estate. It's opposite Lawson Hunt Industrial Estate. And that's the access as we go in. That's a track and hard standing inside the site access. And then moving into Lakefield itself, you can see the new lake that's been created. This photograph was taken in 2022, which shows the grassland, which had recently been laid and was growing. And again, across the extent of the site. And with photographs taken in 24 that shows it as it is now, and the lake in the background. This photograph shows the trees that are existing and which are retained, but it also demonstrates the land level changes that have occurred as a result of the land raising that's taken place. The trees sit in a bowl within that landscape. So in terms of history, the import of soil was initially the subject of a prior notification approval under DC 18-1185. However, further importation of chalk and horticultural grade topsoil has taken place and has been used to improve areas of grassland on the native clay soils in the southern section of Lakefield. This further importation is the reason for the current application. This application went to committee in November 22. The application was originally presented to members at that committee, where it was recommended that the application be deferred for two reasons. The first reason was that members of the council requested further submission of additional ecology information and consideration of the impacts. The second reason was members of the council requested further submission of additional drainage information and consideration of impacts. The additional information has been provided by the applicant to address the matters requested. And the information that has been submitted includes the fourth ecology walkover report, November 23, the bathymetric and topographical survey reports, November 23, drainage letter dated the 13th February 23, and applicants' emails and photographs. In terms of ecology, the details that have been submitted were considered acceptable by the council's ecology consultant, and no further objections were raised, and it was considered that the previous concerns had been addressed. In terms of flood risks, photographs provided by the applicant over time show how Lake 4 is coping with the outflows from the Ducky Pond. And they advise that the outflow from Lake 2 is normal in terms of the volume of water entering Lake 4. The waters are spread up the banks to Lake 4. The Environment Agency have visited the site and have advised they have no objection, subject to the length of the pipe which formed the outlet from Lake 4 being extended through the concrete culvert and into Lake 2, and that they fill around and above the pipe in order to strengthen the dam at the end of Lake 4. The pipe has been sourced by the applicant. It is advised that works are in progress to fit it. Notwithstanding this, the West Sussex County Council Lead Local Flood Authority maintain their objection based on the fact that the flood risk assessment isn't considered to adequately demonstrate that there would not be any flooding either upstream or downstream from Field Place as a result of the works carried out to the land and the lakes. The West Sussex County Council Lead Local Flood Authority therefore maintain their objection in the absence of an acceptable flood risk assessment. They've advised that further modelling would be required to demonstrate there is no increase in flood risk elsewhere and that surface water flow path has not been adequately assessed, and that the applicant is not in accordance with the NPPF. On this basis, the application has been recommended for refusal for the reasons as set out in the officer report.
Thank you very much. Invite members of the public to speak. First person is Ken Pritchard Jones. And remind you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry if my voice is a little hoarse, but I'll try and get through this in 2 minutes and not sound like a McDonald's terms and conditions. These comments will be confined to the alleged absence of an adequate flood risk assessment, which appears now to be the only objection to this application, and for the recommendation for refusal. Please bear in mind that this is an application to restore a 13th century lake and make soil improvements, not to build 200 homes. The Environment Agency is the top flood authority in England. It provides the models on which all flood risk assessments are based. It visited the lakes and Lakefield, one of the world's leading water engineers, did surveys and studied our consultants' flood risk reports, 2 of them. It has confirmed that it has no concerns about the lakes of Field Place and that they are not reservoirs. Its model for the catchment area, which is less than 2% of the Upper Arun catchment, which includes the Field Place lakes, was held to be robust and up to date by the inspector in the Lower Broadbridge Farm appeal decision, allowing 133 homes in March 2024. That appeal site is downstream of the lakes and between them and the Arun. We submitted our consultants' reports to the inspector, and her decision was made in the knowledge of those reports, although we opposed the development. County did not object to the Lower Broadbridge Farm development on flood risk grounds. If it had any concerns about flood risk downstream of the lakes, it should have done. The Environment Agency's opinion and the inspector's finding have been supported in practice. Over the last 4 years, the Broadbridge Heath Road is not flooded, frequently flooded in heavy rain after the Solomon Seal development. There's been no flooding upstream or downstream of Lake Fall. The lake has performed as its 13th century engineers intended, despite many named storms and heavy rainfall in recent years, around 6 feet since October 2023. The 18 months to March 2024 were the wettest since records began in 1836. Our relations with the consultant, seconded from a private company to represent County, have not been good ever since we complained about the flooding and the appalling sewage pollution from the drainage in Solomon Seal, which they approved and which they now admit does not work. They do not appear to have read our consultant's reports properly. Please help us clean up the water by approving this application so we can build the filter beds and for the sake of our own wildlife and the River Arun below us. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, Ian Gurley, please.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. I am here representing Warnham Parish Council. Field Place sits in part at least within our parish, and yet we are not formally consulted by Horsham District Council on matters regarding it. Historically, Horsham District Council gave planning permission to Field Place to transport soil to improve the agricultural quality of the soil. Horsham District Council then took action to close the Field Place historic entrance off the Old Guildford Road. This planning application now seeks to address this issue and reopen the established entrance. The residents of Warnham have suffered greatly due to the closure of this historic entrance, with heavy soil lorries accessing Field Place via a country lane, known as Robin Hood Lane. This lane is not curbed, nor is there any separated pedestrian footpath. This has cost the taxpayer greatly due to the constant West Sussex County Council repairs to this lane. It was never constructed to deal with such heavy lorries or the volume of traffic that currently passes along it. The damage to the lane from lorries has also represented major issues for walkers, horse riders, cyclists, as well as car drivers. As a regular user of that lane, I frequently find that I have to dive out of the way of heavy traffic passing along it on my morning runs. The Parish Council has faced large attendance at meetings, online petitions and roadside protests due to access having to be off the Broadbridge Heath Road and not the Old Guildford Road. Warnham Council fully support the reopening of this historic entrance to Field Place, opposite Lawson Hunt Industrial Park. We strongly disagree with the planning officer's recommendations for refusal. Without this planning agreement, lorries can freely return to Robin Hood Lane as they have a right of access to deliver of any type. The width restriction on Robin Hood Lane, if enforced, would transpose the issues of lorries into Broadbridge Heath, residential roads and through Warnham Village Centre, increasing any risk of accident and damage, not only to property but also to individuals using both village centres. This planning permission to open the Old Guildford Road access would reinstate what was in place at the time of the original planning permission. It would stop lorries from accessing Field Place via residential roads and causing concern for safety of children, residents and the like. Warnham Council are very supportive of rewilding and the reinstating of nature. As such, we welcome Field Place's endeavours. Field Place owners also intend to place a new gated entrance reflecting the birthplace of the poet Shelley on the Broadbridge Heath Road. Horsham Council have endorsed and celebrated Shelley recently, should the Old Guildford Road entrance be opened. We do not see there is an issue of soil lorries travelling past the historic house, as they have done so for years. The track of the lorries is well established, being used by tractors, etc., as well as soil lorries within the estate boundary. We disagree with the planning officer that this is an issue or could cause harm to the house due to significant distance from the house to the track. We support restrictions of lorry movements, timing and daily quantity through the Old Guildford Road entrance. The main roads around the Broadbridge Heath areas have received investment to carry that volume of traffic. Warnham's lanes have not. We therefore request of members that you consider Warnham, allow access to Field Place for heavy vehicles via their historic entrance opposite Lawson Hunt Industrial Park, and that traffic can then be controlled while supporting the efforts to re-establish Field Place as a home for nature and conservation. Chair, Committee, thank you.
Thank you very much. I just have a question to ask of the officers. Bear with me a moment. Just need to ask a question of the officers, if you could bear with me a moment. Okay, thank you. Invite the ward members to comment on this. So, Councillor Greenwood.
Thank you, Chair. Just wave at me if you can't hear me. I can't express how much I feel for the people involved in this application. I've seen the ecological report sent through, and to see a site being cleared and wildflowers growing and bird species increasing, it just strikes me as exactly the kind of project that should be encouraged from a biodiversity point of view. And then obviously I've been to Warnham Parish Council meetings. I've seen the stress that's been caused by lorries going down Robin Hood Lane. It's a dangerous situation and it's gotten really fraught, and I really feel for everyone involved. And it's just sad that it's got to that state. What I wanted to clarify is, if we're looking at refusing this application based on officers' recommendations, from an enforcement point of view, I'd be loath to see the lake filled in and soil removed and then lorries put back on the roads to take the soil out again. So I just wanted to just have that clear, the consequences of this decision, because obviously it's a huge impact. Thank you.
A decision to refuse is different to a decision to enforce. They are different tests, and I think we can't make a decision. You're not making two decisions today. There are two distinct decisions. If members were minded to refuse, obviously the applicant would have the right to appeal as well. And then if the council were to refuse it, and an appeal was successful, or the applicant didn't appeal, then we would have to decide whether or not we would wish to enforce against it. But that's a different decision with slightly different tests. than the determination of this application. I'm sorry, that probably doesn't help, but that's how it would work. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Utan.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This has been ongoing now for as long as I can remember. I mean, it really has affected so adversely the residents of Warnham. Robin Hood Lane has been described as a lane which is just not suitable for lorries. The alternative is to allow the owner to use the access of Lawson Hunt, Broadbridge Heath. He really and truly, this business of flooding seems to be quite risible when you consider that we've just had the wettest, literally the wettest period on record since records began. And there has been no flooding upstream or downstream from these lakes. So they would appear to be operating exactly as they should be. Some of the photographs of Amanda Wilkes has shown us are out of date anyway, because there's been huge growth, wildflower growth, and you did say that it was in 2022. Yes, 24 is totally different. So I would think that really, at the end of the day, we really should support the applicants on the premise that the flood risk is so difficult to try and ascertain when we've had literally no evidence of it at all. And the river at Newbridge has been flooded so often, because I go over the bridge so often, and it seriously has not affected in any shape or form any of the land and the upstream, downstream from these lakes. So I think that these lakes are probably an advantage, actually, and I will definitely not vote in favour, I'm afraid, of the recommendation. Thank you very much.
A few comments have been made around traffic impacts for this development. This is retrospective, so if permission is granted or refused, it wouldn't have any impact on the traffic HGVs in the wider road network, because that impact has passed. So I just want to sort of clarify that point in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other councillors want to comment? No? Oh, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I went to the briefing on this and had lots of questions, and it's one of the most complex planning applications I've ever seen. And I wanted to get more clarity and understand it further. What I did get was Adrian's last comments, was that the works has stopped on this site and the trucks have currently stopped. And if we pass this application, there won't necessarily be any more trucks, but obviously the access is allowed should the next plan application go ahead. There's a clear entrance for that to go through. But if we refuse this application, then again the trucks will stop. So I thought it was very interesting that the applicants, the objectors, and there were a lot of objections online. I read quite a few of them, mainly around Robin Hood Lane and the potholes and the traffic. It would appear that the public are probably going to walk away from this pleased tonight, that Robin Hood Lane, either way, will be saved. It's like the crater of the moon sometimes, Robin Hood Lane. I ride my bike down there. So that's pleasing that we can probably please the public. Obviously, this applicant wants to get his plan application over the line. The local ward members are supportive. I wonder whether there is a way of... we've got one statutory consultee that is objecting to this planning application. I don't feel technically qualified to overrule a statutory consultee. I'm wondering whether we could delegate this to the head of development to approve, subject to that applicant's withdrawing their objection. Thank you, Chair.
I think generally planning decisions are evidence-based, so you would have technical details to support a planning application which would evidence that there isn't an impact, and obviously that's what the statutory consultee, the lead local flood authority, considers is missing in terms of flooding. And you would expect an application to be supported to demonstrate it doesn't have a harmful impact. We don't have that. Obviously, there has been a passage of time, and that's something members are mindful of. Obviously, that's because it's retrospective, but still, there is a passage of time there. Members, as you've noted, as Councillor Utan noted, that's something for you to consider. But obviously, it isn't a technical evidence base, and I think I wouldn't, just because you've had a wet year, is that sufficient for members to be satisfied that there are not likely to be any issues going forward? So I think those are the matters, really the key matters that members need to consider. It is an option open to members to delegate it, but what I would say is essentially that's what members did last time, is defer it for further information, and we are some significant period on and we do not have sufficient information. So it is an option open to you, but it's not necessarily the case that the statutory consultee would remove their objection, and they would only do so if additional information were to be submitted. And obviously we're a year on and we don't have that. So I do think it's probably one where members need to make a decision. I'm not sure delegating it or deferring it will result in a different position than what you have before you now, given how long we have had this application deferred for. But ultimately, that's your decision, members. Thank you.
Councillor Vickers.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Can you just clarify for me? Back in November 22, this application was recommended for approval, and it was deferred for those further reports to come through. So that was the ecology and the flooding. And now it's on for refusal simply for the flooding aspect of that further information. I totally sympathise with the local members. I totally sympathise with the parish council. There is no, as I see it, there is no likelihood of the continuation of heavy goods vehicles on Robin Hood Lane going forward, because enough of it has already been done. Am I correct, or have I got that wrong? So if we were to refuse that, that wouldn't stop them continuing to do it unless we were to take some form of enforcement action. So I have a lot of sympathy with the local viewpoint, actually.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Chair. To the officers, I was just wanting some clarification. Obviously, we have had wet weather over the intervening 12 months. We've put the, if you like, the case has been put to the weather and to the tests of flooding. So have we had any reports of adverse flooding or any adverse effect at all of this since then? Because that's a real life test.
No, we haven't. Not that we're aware of, no.
Councillor Skip.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Just for my clarification, this is a retrospective application. Yeah, I mean, I'm right. Looking back through the history, it seems to me that that it's just been a category of what I would call failure to come to any conclusion in the last few years. There have been appeals to the High Court. There have been notices that we have put in place which have not been either considered, or when they're in place they've been flouted. So I find this a very, very strange application. But unfortunately, the argument that's been put forward is that it's all done now. So in fact, anything that's happened really seems to me, are we going to say, take all the lorries loads of soil and hardcore and everything else back from whence it came? We're not going to do that. So if we actually turn this down and say, no, we're not going to agree to it, what's the recourse? The recourse is that nothing's going to change. The land will stay as it is, the lakes will stay as they are, and we can do nothing about it, because we're certainly not going to reverse the lorries down Robin Hood Lane. And I've been down there and I've had a lot of people who have said to me, it's a disaster if you're walking or running down there. So it seems to me that in the end, common sense has to take precedence. And from my perspective, the answer is to much as I am not happy about it, is to grant this so that in fact the residents don't suffer anymore. The animals and the wildlife can get on with what it does best. The lakes hopefully won't flood or cause flooding, and we won't have to see this coming up to planning committee again. So I'm terribly sorry, but for me, common sense just proves that you can do what you want to do if you've got enough desire to do it, and we are powerless in effect to do anything about it. So I would say we have to apply this and bite the bullet and accept it.
Thank you.
Councillors, I just want, we just need to be careful about a decision to consider this planning application and a potential decision that we may find ourselves in about whether we pursue enforcement action. I think they are different. You may have heard me say at committee before, when you consider a planning application, you're effectively considering it as though it's not there. Obviously, in this instance, you can see what it looks like, so that there are benefits to it. But I think we need to be careful about just kind of considering an application by saying, well, it's done now, that therefore we should just approve it. I think we have to, as I say, consider it as though it wasn't there, all the evidence base before you, all the benefits, the disbenefits, etc. Ultimately, if it is refused, whether the council pursues enforcement action and says take it back to where it was, that's a different decision. That's not a decision on whether this planning application is acceptable or not. So I hope that helps. And I was just a bit concerned, Councillor Skip, we were mixing up those two, although completely acknowledge you can see it there, so you know you can see what it looks like. But I know it's difficult with a retrospective application, but I hope that helps some way. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Utah.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Can I just say that the reason that I would like to grant the planning permission is because there is absolutely no way that any flood risk has occurred throughout this entirely terrible wet time. And also there have been, I think, about almost 150 people that have objected to this refusal. They want him to have permission. And I think that really we have pulled out every stop under the book to try and stop it. And I think this latest one, which is flood risk, is just not applicable. It just hasn't occurred. And the benefit to the wildlife and ecology has been absolutely enormous. You know, it was really advantageous to go on a site visit. It's a pity more people didn't, to see exactly what was happening. And it's all a plus plus. So I would like to say, can we please grant planning permission?
Sorry, are you putting forward a motion there, Councillor Utah?
Yes, I've forgotten how to do it. Yes, hang on. What do I have to say? I propose that we grant planning permission. Thank you.
That's the motion. The motion is that we grant planning permission. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Skip. Apologies. I want to clarify the reason for approval.
Because there is no evidence at all about it, and no likelihood of being able to predict something which might happen once in 100 years. It's just like freezing.
Okay. Did you capture?
Sorry.
No, sorry. I'm asking the opposite.
Because there's been no flood risk, and it's almost impossible to try and predict that there may be a flood risk when floods of the nature that seem to be concerning people occur approximately once every 100 years. And I would have thought that we'd have had virtually the prime example of when it would have flooded in the last 6 months.
Okay, thank you. So we just want to take a short break to clarify the position on this statement. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Okay, thank you. The officer will now. Let me read it. Oh, I will. The officer will now read out the proposed motion.
So the reason being proposed to approve the application is due to the risk of flooding is considered low given the time the development has been in situ, and any residual flood risk is considered outweighed by the ecological benefits of the development. And the application is therefore delegated to the Head of Development and Building Control in consultation with local members and the Chair of the committee for conditions.
Thank you, beautifully
Okay.
put.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Skip. All those in favour? Oh, apologies, sorry.
Before we move to vote on this motion, I still have some questions from the officers. Just for my own clarity, you gave a description of, we're not compelled to support a move to change, the recommendation, and that a refusal for this application is still a thing. Could you just describe to us the consequences if tonight we were to uphold the officer's recommendations and we were to refuse everything? Could you just outline for us what happens next and what the consequences are?
If members were minded to refuse it, the applicant would have a right of appeal. So they would have 6 months in which to appeal. When it's retrospective, we usually give them a much shorter deadline to appeal before we'll consider enforcement. So they would choose to appeal, and they may wish to do so. If they don't appeal, or if they do appeal and the inspector dismisses it, then we would have to consider whether we would pursue enforcement action against it. And that's slightly different test than a planning application, because you consider a wider public interest test as well as planning policy as to whether you would pursue enforcement action on a site or not. So when an application is refused, it's not automatic that enforcement action is taken. We need to consider that wider public interest test as well as any harm identified to then consider whether we would pursue enforcement action. And enforcement action is quite complex, and serving an enforcement notice doesn't remedy a breach, you know, so you have to consider, you know, whether it be worth prosecuting and the cost and benefit of that. So you would go through that whole process. So as I said, just because an application is refused doesn't automatically mean that a council would take enforcement action.
Thank you for the clarification. Just one further question then on that. So there could be a situation whereby potentially the members decide to uphold the refusal, that's then continued to be refused, and then the council itself then decides not to undertake any enforcement action. And so there's a situation where something is just refused, but it continues in perpetuity. Is that how it works?
Yes, potentially, and I can hear Councillor Vickers saying over a period of time it will become lawful. So after, you know, generally speaking, after a period of time, so if the council doesn't enforce against it, it becomes lawful. So that is an option open, and obviously it could be the case you want to refuse something because it is contrary to policy, and you don't want to set up a position where you are refusing things that, you know, has potential harm, but it's not in the wider public interest to pursue enforcement action. So that is a potential route. Obviously, I can't comment on what would happen here, but that is a potential route.
So just on that then, what you're saying is members could potentially refuse the application, it wouldn't be enforced. After a period of time, it would become accepted, but the members have then signalled that they won't just rubber stamp through retro applications, and that's essentially what you're saying. Is that right?
Well, I think ultimately, as I said, you have to consider an application as though it's not made. You know, I think members need to think, if this come before you and it wasn't retrospective and you had an objection from a statutory consultee on flood risk, what would you do? I think that's what members need to consider. Thank you.
And one final question is just on the fact that so much of this is hinging on the advice from a statutory authority on one part of this. Is there a reason why they weren't here today to discuss that with us, or to be scrutinised from us, so we could get that information on that one aspect concerning the flooding issue?
Generally speaking, statutory consultees wouldn't come along to committee. It's not a common occurrence. On very rare occasions have we had a county highway engineer here. Obviously, if members felt that it was particularly important, we could ask them to attend, but it's not standard practice for them to attend. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your indulgence, Chair.
Thank you. I am going to move to the vote on the motion. Could you just repeat that for benefit of the members? Thank you.
Okay, so to delegate approval to the Head of Development and Building Control with the conditions to be agreed with local members and the Chair of the committee for the following reason. The risk of flooding is considered low given the time the development has been in situ, and any residual flood risk is considered outweighed by the ecological benefits of the development.
Thank you. Just to repeat, we had a seconder in Councillor Skip, correct? Yeah. All those in favour of the motion? Okay. All those against? Any abstentions?
So we had 13 vote for, none against and 3 abstentions. Therefore, approval has been given. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next agenda item, which is DC 240220 Field Place Estate, Byfleet Lane, Broadbridge Heath. Could I ask the officer to make their presentation, please?
Thank you. The application is for DC 240220 Field Place. This is the second of the two applications. The proposals are for the continued deposit of clean topsoil and two different types of chalk to an overall depth of 2 metres across the whole of Reservoir Field for biodiversity and agricultural improvement, and also includes the installation of electric gates and wheel washer to Old Guildford Road West. The estate comprises 73 hectares of agricultural grassland supporting a herd of 80 to 125 winter park cattle and a flock of 20 to 50 ewes. The site comprises an undulating landscape. The works are also in regard to cattle management at Field Place. So as with the previous application, the built-up area boundary is to the north of the site. I'll move through that. We've already sort of talked about those bits. So the site is identified as being within flood risk zone 1. Just turning to the location plan. So that shows the area Reservoir Field within the wider context of Field Place, and the existing part of the track that winds its way up from Old Guildford Road West in the brown, just coming up from the Old Guildford Road West opposite Old Lawson Hunt. It passes the Grade 1 listed building, and that's the area shown in green, and it moves on to the field itself where there's a temporary track shown in grey. That's a slightly larger picture of the Reservoir Field itself with the track going into the field. So this shows a typical perimeter section of the earthen wall, which is clay-based, and it shows the original level of the field. And it also demonstrates the height of the infill from the topsoil and chalk, which would be approximately 2 metres in height. Above that, there would be a 2 metre fence, and similarly, there would be a tree boundary with fence and screen adjacent to that. So again, this shows the entrance into Field Place. This shows the access track route, and then it crosses the culverts where you can see the stream beneath. And then it passes through the fields up to the Grade 1 listed building, and then in front of it, that's where the existing track is, and then it continues upwards towards Reservoir Field, past the agricultural buildings, and then into the field, and you can see the 2 metre earthen wall bunding in the photographs, and you can see how the land falls away from the tree boundary at the top. Essentially, this is the area that would be subject to the infill from the soil, topsoil and chalk that's being brought into the site. Just moving on to show you some photographs. Again, that's the track coming up. And that's it going past up towards the listed building and beyond, and then it goes back across the culvert down to Lawson Hunt. The prior notification consent was granted under a Part 6 Agricultural and Forestry Class A-B of the General Permitted Development Order 2015 in June 2018 under DC 181185. Engineering works to raise the land at Reservoir Field were approved. These engineering works were sought as part of the effective management of grassland and mitigation of inherent surface water wetness and poaching risks. The timeframe for the completion of the works permitted under prior notification consent expired on the 4th of June 23. As such, no works or traffic movement should be taking place in connection with the land works or on Reservoir Field. There was additionally another prior notification application under DC 19-1169, which was for an agricultural access track, and that was refused on the 27th of the 8th, 2019. The access track that's being proposed before us is similar to that, and similarly the reasons for objections are the same. The main objections in relation to the application are that there is a lack of a satisfactory flood risk assessment. The applicant has not satisfactorily demonstrated that the proposals would not result in any further flooding either upstream or downstream from the site, and that the landscaping impacts are not satisfactorily demonstrated, and the proposals are not justified in terms of the landscape impacts arising from the proposed access track, and the proposed associated land level changes are considered to detract from the rural area of the area. It's advised that the landscape harm would result in the proposed access track it is advised that the landscape harm that would result from the proposed access track and the absence of satisfactory flood risk assessment are reasons for refusal. It's recommended the application be refused as reasons set out in the officer report.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Vanessa Davies, please.
Sorry?
I'd like to invite your 2 minutes for speaking.
Oh, I wasn't sorry to have a slot. Okay, I'll happily speak.
You're on the list.
As a parishioner.
Could you sit with the mic?
Nothing planned because I told I wasn't going to say that. Okay. I just want to, on behalf of the residents of Warnham, our absolute concern, which many of you voiced, is the danger to life going on currently in Warnham. I mean, obviously the lorries have paused for the moment, but what we're not clear about at the moment, have we agreed that the new access is going to be permitted, or have we not? Are we still looking at the problems that we're enduring as a community? I'm just a bit unclear now what we've actually approved and what hasn't been approved. The access is now approved. The new access of the Lawson estate, that has now been approved.
Sorry, forgive me, but you're not here to ask questions.
Okay,
The members,
but that just affects what I'm going to say.
can ask questions,
would somebody...
but not members of the public.
Okay, I'm just confused because you've just approved something and now there's a second half. So we just wanted to understand where we are because it affects what I'd like to say. If you're saying that no, that hasn't been approved yet, and obviously that's a question I can't ask, we really just have to reiterate where we as a community are coming from, in that it's very healthy to discuss about floodplains and everything else, but we have to have a reassurance from the council that the council will act to protect the lives of the parish of Warnham and anybody going down Robin Hood Lane or also Broadbridge Heath Road, because if you've not experienced it, it is lethal. It's not even inconvenience to your car. It is lethal. People walk, they jog, they're on horseback. We have to include that as part of this process because it is not in isolation. We have to consider what are we going to do to protect this council, because if somebody's killed on that road, it is the fault of the council. So all I want to say is I'm not quite sure where we are at the moment, but if we haven't approved this new access, that has got to be a fundamental concern of the community.
Okay, thank you. I hope I got it right this time. Lorna Cobbett, please.
I'm speaking in the same capacity as Vanessa because sat there, we're getting incredibly confused about what's going on in relation to the two planning applications. I thought I was going to come and speak about the prior one because in my mind that was the one that was linking to the new accessway, and that's what we as a community, as Vanessa's saying, want to get across, because we've known nothing for years now but lorries that are too large, too heavy, too frequent, travelling down country roads that quite frankly they shouldn't be driving down. And these are roads that have signs indicating a width restriction, and it's just not been enforced, and it's being flouted or has been flouted on a near daily basis for most of 2024 and the previous years. So we've been galvanising support across the community, as you've seen, in terms of the numbers that have made their support for the applications, depending on which one we're talking about, that you've seen before you today. And we've done that because we understand that that is the only way we are going to stop these lorries going down the country lanes, that they're ill-equipped to do so. So this is the stance that we as the community feel really, really strongly about, because we've just had enough. And Horsham District Council just needs to listen to the community, because this is your issue to fix, and we just want to make sure that the community's voice is heard, and that we have no more lorries going down our country lanes that are, quite frankly, not equipped to be able to travel on them. So if I'm talking about an application that is completely irrelevant and we've done the access, I can only apologise, but I think you can get a sense of the strength of feeling amongst the community, and it's just something that we're not going to accept, and we're looking to Horsham District Council to make sure that this situation never arises again. Thank you.
Yeah. Just pause speakers for a moment. There are a couple more speakers whilst we just clarify a couple of points. Thank you.
Yes, I just want to focus on the question around what's been approved under the first application. That approved purely the Bellmouth access and gates into the field of Old Guildford Road West. It doesn't approve the access track that you see in front of you on the screen that runs through Lakefield to connect up to Reservoir Field. So this application in front of us now is for that connecting track, which would take traffic for the current proposal to Reservoir Field. Now we'll comment on the traffic implications of this proposal after the speakers, because there are some clarifications we need to give, but hopefully that addresses what the difference between this current application is and the one that has just been approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. David Lawton, please.
Thank you. I make no apologies that this is going to get a little bit repetitive. So I am also a resident living on the edge of Warnham Parish Council, where it borders with Broadbridge Heath. We have got another application here. This seems to be yet another case of seeking retrospective permission to regularise action that has already begun. It's very clear from me that until the work recently stopped, vehicles depositing soil and chalk were accessing the site via Robin Hood Lane and an entrance off Broadbridge Heath Road. And I think that is the big anxiety of residents, as we've heard, and is certainly shared by myself, is around continued use of that access point into the site. I mean, really, my point is that if, and I use the word if very deliberately, if access is to continue, then it needs to be improved. I would flag to councillors, the strength of public feeling. We've heard it here in this meeting. It's very clear in terms of the consultation responses to this application. There were over 130 of those, and almost without exception, whether they were for or against the application, they made comments about Robin Hood Lane. And again, I just want to reiterate what has already been said. This is a country road. It has a width restriction of 2 metres. And it's very clear why there is that width restriction. The road was simply not built to take the level of traffic that has been coming up here. The traffic comes past my house. On busy days, we've been looking at 40 vehicles entering the site and leaving the site. That is 80 movements. They regularly pass each other on Broadbridge Heath Road, where they can just about squeeze past each other, but they do damage the verge. That's certainly not the case when they meet each other going down Robin Hood Lane, and the road is repeatedly trashed.
Could I ask you to bring your comments to a conclusion, please?
Yes, I think probably just to finish off by saying, there is a real issue around access here and a real safety issue that has to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken Pritchard-Jones, please.
Chairman, I had prepared a speech about this, but in view of what's just been said, I'm going to change it if I may. The reason for the lorries running down Robin Hood Lane is because your council took enforcement notice against the access in from the Old Guildford Road where you've granted consent. There was a historic access there. That was not enforced against. What was enforced against was the improvements to that access in such a way that it prevented us using it. Therefore, we lost the appeal in the Court of Appeal on two technicalities. One, that the minister has no right to reclassify a road which has already been classified. In other words, the Old Guildford Road, right the way through to the Carfax, is now still the A281. Where the council have done the pedestrianisation, that is technically unlawful. And therefore, this was lost on a technicality, and we've been using the access from the Old Guildford Road without any inconvenience to the parishioners of Warnham or indeed Broadbridge Heath if your council had not taken enforcement action. We have to ask ourselves why. Why did you do that? And you've actually served up years of unpleasantness for the parishioners of Warnham when there were no complaints at the time of the lorries going in once we'd completed the works themselves to the lake and to the lake field, because the complaints by the residents of Old Guildford Road East were to the noise of the workings within the field, not to the access lorries themselves. And so I have to say that I have every sympathy with the Warnham parishioners about the plight that has been visited upon them, but that is the responsibility of the planning department of this council, not ourselves, who had every right to use that access, but we mistakenly in law improved it when we thought we had every right to improve it, but as it was, because of a technicality, we did it unlawfully, and therefore enforcement action was taken.
Thank you. Could I ask you to bring your points
That's
to
it.
conclusion?
I was going to give a speech about this particular application, but I don't think that's appropriate in the circumstances because I've overrun my time.
Thank you.
Just respond on some of the points made. On the last series of points, I'll just refer you members to pages 108 and 109 of the committee agenda pack, which itemises the enforcement action that's been taken by the council on various matters at Field Place. Now, in terms of highway movements, I think it's safe to say we're fully aware of the concerns and the impact of movements from various activities at Field Place have had on residents in Warnham, Robin Hood Lane, etc. And as we've set out in the report, those will not be impacted by this development, whether it's granted or not. Those activities took place in respect of permitted development that took place on Field Place, and that has now ceased. With the permitted development for the land raising in Reservoir Field, the time limit of that expired in July last year. So there is currently no planning permission at Field Place that enables or authorises HGVs to move in the wider network to Field Place. This current application for further land raising on Reservoir Field is clearly proposing an access track that extends through the site and down to Old Guildford West, as you see on the plans in front of you. That access track is mitigation for the future land raising at Reservoir Field. It is not resolving any other issues of HG movements in the wider area, and that is how you must consider this application, members. As I said, the historic issues, problems and concerns are not now related to any lawful developments on the wider site. Thank you.
Thank you. Ward councillors. Councillor Greenwood.
Thank you. I completely sympathise with the confusion that's been brought by. It took a lot of getting my head around to look at the different applications and sort of distinguish one from the other. As has been said, if we reject this application, there will be no lorries because there's no need for the lorries because it's been rejected. But if we approve, then the lorries have the other access route. So you'd hope either way, this historic problem of lorries going through Warnham and Robin Hood Lane has been resolved. However, I really lament the lack of joined up thinking that seems to have brought this about in the first place, to have been running for so many years, with the parish council and residents not knowing where to go, whether it's the police to enforce width restriction of the road, whether it's West Sussex, whether it's HDC. It really is a problem, and the lady who spoke saying that we have to make sure this doesn't happen again, that sort of hits the nail on the head. And it's a tricky one as well, because it is a worthwhile project from an ecological point of view. As far as I can see, I've seen the ecological reports saying that to improve the quality of the soil. So it's just, as long as whatever happens, we have the conditions there to make sure that there isn't another problem caused like that has been going on these last few years through Warnham. That's my main concern with this application.
Thank you. Sorry, yeah, Councillor Uten.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This application is for the permission to raise the levels to X number of metres. It says that the reason that the council are refusing this is because they feel it will cause landscape harm. It's a terribly complicated situation, really difficult for members to understand. I found it difficult to understand even after I'd had a couple of hours on a field trip. It's really complicated, but the fact of the matter is that it has the work that's been done so far has vastly improved the ecology and the growing potential of the land. It has hugely enhanced it. It has really done great things. If the lorries are allowed to go via the old access opposite Lawson Hunt, then there will be no travel by lorries on country lanes, and more specifically Robin Hood Lane. It just won't happen. And the pictures that we've looked at have showed lots and lots of muddied fields. They will be restored to their original grassland, because there will be no need for this track that runs right the way through. Once the work has been finished, it will be restored. It won't be a concrete track, it will be a specific type of material, which means that it can be lifted up again. I don't think it has any impact on landscape other than material benefit. But also it says that there is not enough evidence about the planting that's going to occur. And I think that he has given it. It's not been demonstrated to the satisfaction of the local planning authority that the proposal would not result in increased flood lists, such that there is uncertainty with regards to flood management, and that the policy would be contrary to policy 38, etc., etc. The proposed access track and the associated land level changes and raised edging detract from and erode the informal rural character, ambience and landscaping setting, resulting in an unduly formal and urbanised feature which would not protect, conserve or enhance the landscape character. This is in absolute opposition to everything that the applicant has set out to do over many years. So I really don't understand the reasons for refusal. I really don't.
So the landscape harm that's being referred to isn't in relation to the principle of raising the land, it's in relation to the access track itself. And that is the concern about that access track and the level the land levels on the access track, it becomes a prominent feature in the landscape. Whilst it is recognised that the applicants have said that that will be grassed and chalked and then grassed over it in the future, we are talking about a period of approximately 7 years. So that is still quite a long period of time. But just to clarify that the landscape harm is in relation to the access track itself and not to the principle of raising the land.
Yeah, thank you for that. But also, if it's a condition, it has to and it goes through as part of the application or the permission. It has to be, or approval. It has to be in the condition that it will happen. So you estimate 7 years, which is the outside of the time that I think the applicant estimates.
That is what the applicant estimates. Yeah.
Just to bring to your attention, members, on page 129, the officer recommendation, there are 2 reasons for refusal. So one, as my colleague has just said, is in relation to the landscape impact of the track. Bearing in mind the track's going to be there for 7 years-ish. Is that landscape impact acceptable? Obviously, it's going right through an agricultural field, close to listed buildings, etc. Is that acceptable? And clearly there is harm with an access track going through a rural area. Well, what are the benefits that outweigh that harm? That's what members need to consider. But obviously the reason for refusal 1 is in relation to flood risk, which we did discuss on the first application. And obviously members were considering at that point, it had been there for a period of time. There was no evidence of flooding. Obviously this isn't a retrospective application. And we have an objection from the lead local flood authority, which advises that we do not have sufficient information that demonstrates it would not result in a flood risk going forward. So I think that there are lots of elements to this application, and we need to consider both those reasons for refusal and not just the landscape impact as part of your considerations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Minto, sorry, apologies.
Thank you, Chair. That was really straightforward, wasn't it? I heard a lot of criticism for the officers, the council, and the members historically, and that they were criticised for causing the lorries. I think I'm right in saying that if the applicant hadn't gone ahead with any of the works, there wouldn't have been any lorries in the first place. So I don't think it's fair to criticise us for creating that burden on the residents. I think that was the applicant going ahead when he didn't have approval to continue. I just want to understand this situation a little bit more. I'm sure everyone else does as well. This is not a retrospective. This is about doing something new. If we decline this, there is a history of the works continuing anyway. So I would just want to understand that if we do decline this, what are our powers to enforce and to stop anything happening? Because had we have had our declination, if that word exists, was adhered to in the first instance, we wouldn't be in this situation or have had this situation before. So I just want to ensure, whatever the outcome of this, if we do decline and we support the officer's recommendation, are we able and do we have the power to make sure this doesn't happen and we then get back into a 3-year, 4-year, 5-year spiral of retrospective applications when the work's going to be done anyway? And if we do decline it, that work, I fear, will be delivered through the Robin Hood Lane access or another access because we're not allowing it. So this really scares me, and I'd like to know that we have the weight and the teeth to stop anything if we do decide against this. Thank you.
Obviously, we're considering the access here and not off Robin Hood Lane. I think we have to bear in mind there are other properties and sites accessed off of that. So this application could not close it off in its entirety as a general access. But obviously, this proposal is the access as you've seen on the plan. the council does have enforcement powers. It has a range of enforcement powers that it can use, whether that's a temporary stop notice or a stop notice or enforcement notice. There are various powers. As I discussed earlier, we would have to consider the harm and the benefits in using those, but it is a tool open to us as a council. We can't take enforcement action until there is a breach of planning control. So you can't take enforcement action just because you think something might happen. It actually does need to be starting in order to take that action. But you know, we have tools available to us, and I think we need to make the decision based on the application details itself, not a concern that, you know, the applicant may continue in breach of planning control. We need to consider the details before us. I hope that helps, Councillor. Thank you.
Councillor Livingstone.
Good evening. Yeah, we've got two reasons for refusal, and this is not a retrospective application. So the first one is flood risk assessment. Now, we don't know what the risk is, and this is what's concerning me. What is the impact if we do have flooding? What is the likelihood of flooding? That's what risk consists of, and we're not being told what that is. They're just objecting to it. I think we need more information on what the risk level is for that one. And the second one is regarding, as the officer has explained, about harm to the rural character, etc., ambience, etc. But to whom will that harm apply to? Is it just the environment, or is it to people living close by? Who will be impacted by that harm? They're the items I would like some further information on. Thank you.
In terms of the first one, obviously we've got the consultation response from the lead local flood authority. That there's general standing advice and policy within the national planning policy framework in terms of what level of information we would need. Obviously, if there's points of further questions you would like from that consultee, we can seek that, but we don't have that information before us other than what's in their consultation response. In terms of harm on the second one, it is general landscape character harm. When you're talking about harm to residents, that's generally amenity harm, you know, and generally, unfortunately, in the English planning system, you don't have a right to a view out of your window. You might, you know, that's not something. So that's not something we consider as an impact on. We can consider that the landscape reason for refusal is general, the general rural character of the area. It is forms the second reason for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened with great interest to the comments that have just been made. I'd like to have comfort on some things, again, from the officers, if I may, because we have a duty, obviously, to uphold planning regulations, but we also have a duty to protect residents. Some very strong points have been made, and I think it's incumbent on us to listen to those. We also have an applicant with form on this. So I would like to have comfort on something of the following. Going in tandem with what Councillor Utan has proposed with a condition on making good the track after a certain period of time, is there a potential? I've got two questions. One is, with the proposed application here, what is the impact on traffic going to be? I'm not overly familiar with the location, so I'd like to have comfort on the road safety aspect for residents. And then secondly, are we able to put belts and braces conditions on any road access and road movements and vehicle types? For example, we might need, or the applicant might need to use vehicles to move or bring materials to and from site, but is there a potential to make conditions on the type and size of vehicles that are used? Those are the sort of things that I think I'd like to know before I'm in a position to vote on this issue.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So just turning to the issue of the amount of traffic that would be generated, the applicants advised that there would be approximately 20 lorries a day, which would result in 40 movements, so there and back. It wouldn't be all year round, it would be Monday to Friday, and it would be for the 7-year duration of the work. So, yeah, obviously there would be some impact on the local roads. This is actually obviously a proposed application, so it's not the same situation as the previous application. So if we were to allow this, then we will get those traffic movements coming through for that duration of time. Whereas the other application, obviously, because it was retrospective, that's all fallen away.
In terms of size of vehicles, councillor, it's very difficult in planning to control that because we can only control what's within the red edge of the application site. So we can't control vehicles on a public highway network. So I think obviously there are, we heard from the speakers, there are certain restrictions on those. We as a planning authority can't enforce those. Unfortunately, we can't add conditions because it sits outside of the red edge of the application site. Thank you.
Thank you. And could you just provide some kind of comfort for us on that road access? We heard about Robin Hood Lane and the size of that and the width of those country lanes and how they were impacting local residents. For this application, could you let me know what's different? What's, in terms of impact on the roads?
Well, in this case, councillor, the access is onto Old Guildford Road West, which takes you onto the strategic road network, the A road network that runs west towards Guildford and then south through Broadbridge Heath and onto the A24. So to get any lorries moving outside of that back onto Broadbridge Heath Road, Robin Hood Lane, etc., would be very challenging in the first instance because it's a roundabout route that is not necessary. So in this respect, the officers are satisfied that if this was granted, that HGV movements could be conditioned through the access track as shown on the plan in front of you, and that wouldn't have an adverse effect on residents on Robin Hood Lane, Broadbridge Heath Road, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come to you, Councillor Milne.
Thank you, Chairman. I think a key thing here is I feel that officers have no choice but to recommend the way they have because the statutory authority says there is a flood risk which they're not satisfied with. So it would have been remarkable for us to ignore that or overrule that, or for officers to do so. It's bizarre because normally we're in the position of wanting them to object to a proposal because of a flood risk. How many times have we been in this room where locals say there's a flood risk and the statutory authority says there isn't? So this is a truly topsy-turvy day and a deeply confusing application, I have to say. So for that reason, I may be forced into abstaining again on this as on the first, but I'll listen to what everyone else has to say.
Thank you. I can't remember the first.
Councillor Mercer has been waiting.
Okay, right. Councillor Mercer, sorry, apologies.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm looking particularly at the reasons for refusal. I am persuaded, I think, by Councillor Newton about the fact that this is a temporary proposal for the access track, and that it can be that its reconstitution, its reinstatement can be conditioned, and that I think is very important because at the end of the day, we are talking about the impact that previous heavy goods vehicle movements have had on residents, and this is for work that will be carried on in the future, and that if that access track is not properly made into something that can carry the HGVs and thereby directly access the strategic road network, if any further work continues, then that will be carried out through the old route. Now, I appreciate that work won't happen or should not happen if the main proposal is refused. So then we look at the flood risk assessment, and again, we're in that situation where this applies to the entire application, not just about the access, as I understand it. So yes, about the access, it talks about runoff, the hard standing, and that kind of depends on what sort of road is put in there. We've already said that in the previous application, we might be able to look at an approval, but with delegated powers in order to condition this particular aspect. And I'm fairly positive about seeking to do that again.
Thank you, councillor. Members can delegate it subject to the submission of additional information. Another option open to members is obviously defer it and seek additional information on flood risk matters to seek to address that reason for refusal. That's open to members. If you were minded to do that, I do think we need some form of timescale attached to that, because obviously the previous application we discussed was with us for some significant period of time, and we still had not addressed to officer satisfaction, address those matters. So I think if members are minded to delegate it or defer it, I would suggest a timescale attached to that for the submission of that information, and if that's not received, then it's either brought back to members to consider or we look to refuse it. But I think probably in this instance, although I'm always quite keen to delegate, in this instance I think it may be better to defer it, and then members can consider that additional information submitted and a further consultation response from the county as the lead local flood authority. But I would suggest that's no more than 4 months tops, I think. But that's for you to consider, members. Thank you.
So before I come to Councillor U10, Councillor Hogman, do you still want to?
Thank you, Chair. We granted the access gate, so there is access to this site, and I guess this application wouldn't have even really been possible if we hadn't granted access in the previous application. So the two are closely linked. I think the site looks like a pig's ear. The photos they put up currently, the land base, the current site looks awful. I've seen photos of the applicant where he's made good the previous land, and it looked very acceptable. I hear the two local members are reasonably supportive of the wilding, the planting, the fact this applicant has made the land good, and that the applicant is trying to better his land. So from the public's point of view, I think it's great news that either way they've got the trucks off Robin Hood Lane at this moment in time, because and my understanding, and again I had to ask these questions, was that there was a 5-year approval from 2018 that expired in 2013. So the reason why all works have stopped is because there is no current legal premises for it to continue. So either way, we've got no trucks. This application is, do we wish to allow this applicant the opportunity to make good his field and finish it? If we don't grant this application, I don't know, we come back to similar to Colin and Nick's points of what's going to happen when that field enforcement action. I guess I'm guessing that it may have to level the existing site and make good as best he can. I guess my fears are, and we shouldn't really discuss fears, but that if it's not granted, it's probably going to go to appeal. There is access off Byfleet's Lane and existing access to that site if we don't allow the track. Similar to other councillors in the room, that track has got a 7-year expiry date and would be removed and made good. Landscape character and harm. If it's going to be ultimately made good, if the fields are going to be betterment, I similar to other councillors in the room, I am minded to support this application. But I do hear what Councillor Milne and the Head of Development have said. We don't currently have a statutory consultee that's objecting to this site, so I would possibly propose a deferral so that we can gather more information and allow the applicant. So I think the applicant's in the room is probably listening to the fact that we wish to be supportive and wish to allow him to make better his land, and we wish that access track to go in, but our hands are slightly tied at this moment in time. We don't have enough information and we have a statutory consultancy objecting. So I would support a deferral. In fact, just to move the evening along, I propose a motion to defer this with delegated power to the Head of Development, and I'll put a timescale on it of 4 months, 6 months?
4 months.
4 months?
It's up to you, councillor, but I would suggest we aim to bring it back within 4 months. I think that gives sufficient time for information to be provided and consulted on, and bring it back to members. So I think that focuses the mind in terms of hopefully seeking some additional information to see whether we can resolve that statutory objection.
Thank you. Okay, so I have a proposal to defer this motion for 4 months if there's a secondary.
Sorry, can I, before we move to the motion, apologies, Councillor Frank had his hand up some time ago.
It was purely just a bit of clarification following on from Councillor Grant's question. Do we have the power to stipulate that that this road will be made good after 7 years?
Yes, we can. Yeah, we could add that condition. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So if you could read out the motion. Sorry? Yeah, I just want to hear what the motion is first. Yeah.
So my understanding from Councillor Hogben is the motion is to defer the application to seek additional information relating to flood risk and further comments from the lead local flood authority for the matter to return to committee within 4 months.
Okay.
Well, it depends on where we come and what we recommend back, Councillor Mercer, but that we can have a think about that. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder for that? Okay. Sorry, I think, did you want to say something, Councillor?
No, I'd just like to speak, please.
Yes, sorry. Yes.
Thank
Okay.
you. Can I just say that this, I think that both the residents and the applicant will throw their hands in horror at the prospect of deferring. It's been going on and on and on. I see absolutely the sense of opening up the Lawson Hunt industrial estate access. It literally stops the lorries going down country roads. As has been mentioned, the access is either the A281 or the A24 or the A264, which are all perfectly capable of carrying lorries, as I know to my cost because I live there. And I just think that we should, actually recommend planning permission. I really do. And I think the appropriate conditions should be the...
Sorry, we do have a motion that we need to
Oh,
discuss.
okay. All right.
We can't discuss two motions at once. So the motion was, sorry.
To defer the application to seek additional information regarding flood risk and to reconsult the county council as the lead local flood authority and to return the application back to committee within 4 months.
And that was, sorry, that was...
Could I just add one point? If this does come back, I thought it was an outstanding idea to invite the local flood authority to speak at the next meeting, should this come back in 4 months' time. They may not attend, but if we could extend that invitation, that'd be much appreciated.
We can certainly ask, or perhaps they could do a briefing if they couldn't attend the meeting. We can certainly ask the question, Councillor Hoppen.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you. All those in favour of the motion? All those against? 3. Any abstentions? Okay.
So that was 12 voting for and 4 against and no abstentions.
Thank you. Before we move on to item number DC 232234, I will take a 2-minute break. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Welcome back. Item number 9, DC 232234, land known as Tanglewood Equestrian, Forest Grange, Horsham. I invite the officer to make the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening. Members are advised to read the addendum notes which accompanies this agenda item. The note addresses matters raised by Colgate Parish Council. In response to the addendum, Colgate Parish Council have reiterated their request that no boot camps should be held on Sundays or bank holidays. So the application site comprises a sand school and part of an adjacent paddock located within the High Weald AONB. The site is in equestrian use and includes an existing area of parking to the east. This is an aerial photo of the sites and its surrounds.
Oh.
Engineers, thank you.
On the technique.
Right, so as I said, this is an aerial photo of the site and its surrounds. So the application seeks the use of the sand school and part of an adjacent paddock for boot camp training events. The training events will take place in 2 one-hour sessions each week with a maximum of 20 attendees at each. No built structures are proposed as part of the application. These photographs show the car park and the paddock as existing. The use of the land is for a short period of time each week, with the land otherwise retained and unaltered for equestrian use. Officers' advice is that the impacts on highways and amenity would be minimal, with recommended condition 5 restricting the number of boot camps, the time of day in which they can take place, and the number of attendees. Consideration has been given to the Parish Council's request that no boot camps take place on Sundays or bank holidays. However, officers do not consider such a restriction necessary given the limited number and short duration of each boot camp. Further conditions restrict the playing of music or amplified sound, the use of floodlighting, and the use of the sand school for private equestrian use only. The application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I invite Kimberly Mayer, please?
No local person in a Forest Grange community supports this application other than the applicant's family. The potential for additional piecemeal applications with similar boot camp operations have over 14 sessions a week. The unadopted C-Class road is still a highway for planning purposes, with locals understanding the issues faced using this road.
Sorry to interrupt you. Could you speak a little closer to the microphone? Apologies. Thank you.
Is that better?
Slightly.
Okay. National Planning Policy, Chapter 9 states that there must be safe and suitable access for all users, and item 115 specifically states that development should be refused if there's an unacceptable impact on highway safety. It is absurd the full route to the site has not been assessed for highway safety, only the site parking and exit to the public highway, and it's irrational that zero consideration has been given to the impact on all users on this road. This opens a recommendation to maladministration, and these are material considerations that have not been addressed, but they are clear in the objections. Single track road is shared with horse riders, pedestrians and cyclists. There's no pavement, there's no bridleway, there's no street lighting, no passing places and hidden entrance on the 1 kilometre drive to the site from the public highway. A convoy of 20 vehicles from members of the public arriving and leaving en masse, entirely alien on this road, will increase conflicts with all users, which already occur daily. Convoy will damage unsupported grass verges and cake the road in clay mud if it meets just one delivery van in the opposite direction. The increase in traffic will significantly increase risky manoeuvres or reversing around blind corners with high hedging to allow vehicles and larger vehicles to pass. Planning appeals fail on these points alone. There are other nearby local sites with safer transport infrastructure and accessibility for sustainable travel for this purpose already available for use, such as Pease Potage, Horsham Park. You have failed to take into account your own policy number 41. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Simon Briggs, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Committee. I need to preface my points by saying that I'm concerned about possible retaliatory action by members of the applicant's family and believe that that concern is shared by others in the Forest Grange community around Tanglewood. The individual I'm concerned about has a criminal conviction for assaulting a police officer.
Sorry, can I interrupt?
Has threatened to shoot one of our neighbour's dogs.
Ask you to stop? That is not
Yes.
material to the planning application.
May I respond?
Depends what you're going to say.
Okay, so I think it is material in the
sorry,
sense.
it's not.
In the sense, well,
Okay, I'll just
may I explain why?
Explain. Get the lawyer to brief you on this.
We need to address the planning application, not talk about things that are, in the background that are nothing to do with it. We need
Okay.
to address those issues, the planning issues.
Okay, and let me endeavour to do that. In the previous applications that we've heard, there was talk of the weight of objection and support. My point in raising these issues is to indicate why there may not have been, why there is not a great presence from Forest Grange residents this evening, and why the number of objections tabled may not be as great as actually exist.
Chair, I'm sorry, but this is supposition. I think we need to address planning issues and things that we can substantiate. Thank you.
Okay. I'm a vulnerable road user and concerned about safety, especially with increased traffic concentrated around camp timings, on a narrow drive with a number of blind corners and no lighting. No permission has been granted for commercial use of our private drive. Camp users would be trespassing. Non-commercial conditions have been applied to previous land developments locally. It seems inconsistent that this commercial development be allowed. This looks like another part of a wider plan to prime the land for residential purposes after a lawful development certificate for a residential caravan was refused due to deception by the applicant. Some specifics. In defiance of process, the boot camps restarted 2 weeks ago. Land used for car parking isn't on the site map. Advertisements on social media belie the idea that this is for rural people principally. The bulk of supportive comments have come from people living in Horsham. Ditto. Toilets are advertised but precluded by the recommendations. The planning report appears to grant wider usage than has been sought, 9 till 6 daily, not the 2 hours that were mentioned previously. The application is a Trojan horse, not to benefit people who want to get fit, but intended to open the door to the development of housing on the land. It's unnecessary, it's flawed and unwelcome. The community of Forest Grange residents object to it most strenuously, and it should please be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just respond to a couple of matters. On the point around the hours of operation, as I said, condition 5 does restrict to only 2 one-hour boot camp sessions per week within the window of 9 until 6 each day, but critically no more than 2 one-hour sessions. In terms of future uses for the site, that's not a material planning consideration for you. You are duty-bound to consider purely what's in front of you, which is an application for 2 one-hour sessions, boot camps per week on this land with no built structures, etc. In terms of highway safety and access, this is a sort of private lane down to the site here. County Highways have been consulted. They've applied the paragraph 115 test of the NPPF, which is there should be no highway safety issues. And their judgment, based on 2 sessions per week, is that the movements will be minimal and would not cause such a safety risk. And on that basis, officers are recommending that, given the minimal nature of this application, which I said is for 2 one-hour sessions per week, is that there is not a sort of cumulative impact here or a highway safety concern that officers feel should warrant the refusal of permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hogben, Ward Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. This is another retrospective plan application. I'm led to believe that certainly the applicant started trading, even though it may be ceased now, which can be a blessing or a curse, because obviously perhaps there's been some trials on this site, and perhaps we can get some feedback on them from the locals. On a positive note, this application has had 30 letters of support from 26 households. We've just heard from officers that 2 hours a week is possibly very limited harm. So they're the positives. 30 letters of support, limited, possibly limited movements, limited harm. However, Policy 26 of the Horsham District Planning Framework states that outside the built-up area boundary, the rural character and undeveloped nature of the countryside will be protected against inappropriate development. Any proposal must be essential to its countryside location, and in addition meet one of the following criteria: support agricultural, forestry, extraction of minerals, or provide for quiet, informal recreational use. I'm surprised that officers have recommended this for approval. And I'm surprised, I guess there's perhaps been an interpretation of quiet recreation for informal use. I personally, and I believe the residents of Forest Grange have interpreted that wording differently. Commercial boot camp, shouting, loud voices, commercialisation. Yeah, I'm personally approaching that differently. This is in the AONB as well. This isn't just the countryside. Ruspert and Colgate are in the high weald areas of outstanding natural beauty, and that puts an even higher bar. I will ask that as a process question. I was under the impression from some Planning South members that boot camps are banned in the South Down National Park, and again, it's a sort of question around consistency of this council granting planning permission. Why would consider granting it in this particular location? Essential. Is it essential to this location? I wonder whether the applicants describe this as a brownfield site. I'm going to challenge that and say this is a residential development with equestrian stroke agricultural land. I wouldn't describe it as a brownfield site, so maybe that's been slightly misleading. The parish council have objected. 10 neighbouring properties around this have all complained about this site, and it doesn't have the support of local members. Councillor Kitchen apologises for being here today, but she did ask me to pass on that she was vehemently against this particular application, and she would be voting against it should she have been in the room. The parish council have objected on grounds of noise pollution. There's been more than one letter of complaint. I've read all the 11 applicants, letters of complaint from, letters of objection from the Forest Grange residents, and several of them are talking about amplified music and noise being heard 150 metres away. Light pollution. I have seen some photos that applicants have put in, not applicants, objectors have put in of lighting, and there are floodlights installed on this particular site. I believe from what I've read, they was installed illegally because it was done over 10 years ago. That is now classed as a valid approval, or we cannot object to the floodlights. I do see that councillors have conditioned it that they can't be used for boot camp. So, but the residents are complaining about the bats, the ecology, and the use of lighting that has gone on in the past on this site. Environmental grounds, it's a menage. There's no environmental health statement to support this. Doing a boot camp on a menage, horse manure, creates tetanus, several other lots of, if you just sat and Googled it on your phone now, the watering down, the things they have to do to indoor arenas and menages, there's no, on environmental grounds, we've had other complaints. On amenity grounds, this property is 66 metres from stables and other residents. It's not commercial, it's not industrial. This is an absolutely dark, quiet, this is pitch black at night. You are absolutely in the countryside. 20 cars move. I mentioned light promotion. 20 cars coming in and out late at night would cause issues. Water usage, cleaning of the menage, cleaning of the standing, cleaning of the sports equipment, possible toilet facilities on site. I don't quite see how this escapes or evades water neutrality, and it has been brought up by several people. I see that we've conditioned that this site isn't going to be used after dark. So, but again, on health and safety grounds, there's absolutely no way any activity could be done on this particular site due to how dark it is. I don't think I've ever seen a boot camp without music. I guess that you do get drill instructors and instructors shouting, but the majority of them have music. And again, I see that it's conditioned, but any music wouldn't be in keeping with a sensitive area of the AONB. Whilst this applicant does have letters of support, that demand for need. Again, a quick Google, there are 7 other companies offering boot camps in Crawley, 5 offering them in Horsham. I'm supportive of the business. If the applicant wishes to approach Horsham Council, and if they're in the room listening, I contacted Paul Anderson, and there are boot camps that run in Horsham Park that has parking, that has toilets, that has mowed grass, and we charge them £6 to host that in what I would class as a sustainable location in Horsham Park. So there are other, I guess, I'm saying, is there a need? Well, the applicant has said that there is a need, but there are lots of other sites that are offering a very similar alternative, and Horsham Council may, subject to obviously the appropriate licences and applications, be able to grant some of its own land. I'm happy that the lighting and flood lighting has been addressed. This is a retrospective planning application, similar to the last one. There has been, it does appear, perhaps that they're trying to get more commercial use of this land, because it's the 3rd speculative planning application on this particular site, and it isn't supported by the residents of Forest Grange. I'm going to come back to transport, and this is a question for the officers. This is a private road. The access is on a private road jointly owned by the residents. The objection letters state that the applicant, Mrs. Aston, doesn't have shares in this road, and there's no right to invite members of the public to pass along it. I'd just like some clarification from officers on that particular issue. There's no supporting statement why it's essential to this location. There's no environmental thing on fauna and flora. There's no bat surveys. There's seven recorded species of bats, 4 of which in decline in this particular region, and it's in the Kirtley listed building. In my mind, I guess this is a slightly unbalanced decision, but the tilted balance in favour, to me, this is not essential to the countryside location. I'd be happy to find the applicant or work with the applicant as a person in my ward to find a more suitable location. But unfortunately, I'll listen to the debate on this particular item. But my current thinking is that based on policy 26, that's not essential for the countryside location, I would be recommending that we refuse this application if I was to have a seconder that shared my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to come back?
I'll respond on a few of the points, not all of them. There are quite a few there. On your specific question around private road access, that is a private matter between the various landowners as to whether the applicant will be able to access the site for these purposes. That's not material in planning terms. We're looking purely at the use of the land and its impact in planning use policies. You've referred to health hazard from using equestrian land. Environmental health officers have been consulted and have not flagged that as an issue. In terms of need, there's no policy requirement to evidence a need for a boot camp in this location. So my advice is that's not a material consideration. The fact that there are other boot camps available in the wider area, we need to consider it on the merits of what's in front of us, which is a boot camp on this particular site. And your other comment around the absence of bat surveys, the advice of officers is none unnecessary because the activity will take place during the day. There would be no light, no impact on trees, etc. So the impacts on bats would be negligible to non-existent. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other, Councillor Blackburn?
Thank you. I just want to ask officers, the application is for 2 hours a week, but residents are concerned that that won't be adhered to. Can you tell me anything about enforcement around hours?
I think we have to bear in mind that the applicants are operating outside of any planning permission at the moment, so it doesn't have any restrictions on it. Obviously, the officer's proposal is to add a condition to restrict those hours of use. If they're not adhered to and we have evidence of that, then we it is open to us to pursue enforcement action against that, such as a breach of condition notice. And if that's not complied with, you can prosecute. So, there are mechanisms in which we can use. Officers would only recommend conditions that we feel are enforceable, and that's what's before you today. Thank you.
Councillor Skip.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I was surprised when I saw this on the list for several reasons, but I think that Councillor Hogben summed them up admirably. What struck me was that it is in an area of outstanding natural beauty, and an area of outstanding natural beauty is exactly that, not a place where you can have a boot camp with possibly music, certainly shouting, because I've never heard a boot camp without an instructor that's shouting, noise, and also I think that in pack here, it talks about 26. Now, I think that it goes against our policy 26. It's very interesting that some of us feel it goes against it and others feel that it's not affected by it. So one wonders how effective the policy actually is one way or the other. But having said that, just on the grounds that this is in a quiet area of the forest, and the forest needs protection. There's no doubt about it, and we've all seen various applications made which would nibble away at the forest, and I think that we're going down a very dangerous route if in the middle of the forest we say yes, you can have a boot camp. Finally, for me, it's retrospective. I've said this before, and I think I say it every planning. I am not happy at all about retrospective applications, and I'm certainly not happy about this one. And finally, and I will say this, I think there is a health issue. There's nothing worse than tetanus, and if you've seen cases of tetanus, you will know that it's not pleasant. And one of the main carriers of the tetanus organism, unfortunately, are horses and horse manure. I don't think it's a safe environment to have a boot camp. So for those reasons, I'm not going to support this, and I would support Councillor Hogben should he decide to make his own proposal.
I think it's important to note, members, that there isn't a general ban on boot camps in the OMB or in the countryside. Obviously, we have to assess each application on its own merits. It's not proposed inside the forest itself, it's proposed on a sand score and a paddock. So I think if members are concerned it's contrary to policy 26, that would need to be substantiated. So I think it's not in an open field, it is within a sand score and a paddock. So I think it's difficult to argue it has any wider landscape impacts. What you've got is 20 people exercising without floodlights and music. So I think members just need to be mindful of how you could substantiate and defend a reason for refusal in terms of policy 26 when it's not in the open countryside. It's within a very contained area or on a site that already has a lawful use as equestrian. So I think members just need to consider that as part of your decision making. Thank you.
Councillor Livingston.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I've kept horses for 30 years, my wife and my family, and we've not had one case of tetanus. People look after their horses and clean up. My wife also goes to boot camp. She used to go to the one in Horsham Park. It doesn't make that much noise compared to, the noise which an equestrian running around can make. So this is only for 2 hours a week. I think we've just got to look at this. I think it's 2 hours a week with people who know what the risks are, and there's minimal risk to them. It might do them some good to be out in the countryside. That's all I want to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Vicious.
Yes, you probably won't be surprised to know I haven't actually attended a boot camp myself, but I have heard of others who have been to them, and those that I know that do say there is always music whenever they go, and a lot of shouting goes on. And I was actually in Horsham Park the other day when there was a boot camp session happening, and it was very lively and quite noisy. And I suspect for those residents that live within close proximity to this site, they will hear something. And whether there is a music condition on here that's going to say no amplified sound, I suspect that whoever's actually organising the boot camp will have a very loud voice and will be shouting a lot. So I got sympathy with the local members who are concerned that this is not the right location for it. I've been down there, I know where it is. It is a very rural location, even though it's got an equestrian use on that particular site. Most equestrian uses are in countryside locations, which this is. So I have sympathy with the local members. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move to a vote? No? Okay. The recommendation is that to approve planning permission subject to conditions.
Sorry, Chair, I would like to move an alternative motion to refuse based on policy 26 and the fact that it is not essential to the countryside location. I believe Councillor Skip was happy to second that motion. If you're happy to have a short adjournment, perhaps I could, I appreciate it's a long evening, but I could have 2 minutes with the Head of Development just to clarify if there are any other grounds that we could tighten the conditions up.
I think we're happy to discuss that with you, Councillor Hobben, but I think we do need a general motion in terms of the general reason for refusal in relation to policy 26, and obviously we can assist with the exact wording of that. But I think in order to put forward a motion, my view, colleague, would be that we would need some form of wording in order to then move forward. Thank you. My concern, Chairman, is that we can't substantiate it. I think that's my concern, but obviously if Councillor Hobben has a reason why he considers it contrary to policy 26, then...
Yes, I think if Councillor Hobben's minded to move refusal, fine, but that should be substantiated by planning reasons.
Well, and that's why I suggested an adjournment for 2 minutes. Why have a private discussion with the Head of Development as to we could, hopefully she can give me some advice on how we can better. I mean, the parish council has spoken noise pollution, light pollution, loss of amenity. We could sit here and word, copy the parish councils 5, 6 different reasons if we find that relevant. But obviously, I know the head of development likes them to be enforceable and
Unfortunately, Councillor Hodgman, that's not really how it works, because the officers have made the recommendation to approve, and so you can't then ask them to assist you in putting together your motion to refuse. You must do that yourself.
Sorry, Councillor Livingston, yes. Whilst you carry on with your...
Can I move that we approve the motion? Approve the application, please? Well, does anyone second?
Sorry, we're discussing, sorry, can I just, sorry, we are discussing a proposed motion, or Councillor Hodgman is. We can't discuss two motions at once.
I thought we were discussing the motion on the...
No, Councillor Hodgman is proposing, and we're coming up with some words for refusal against policy 26, which has got to be substantiated. I will give him some time to do that, but not a great deal of time. Have you...
Okay, Chair.
Thank you. And if you...
So I propose that we refuse this recommendation for refusal on the grounds it does not meet policy 26 of the Horsham District Policy Planning Framework, as it states this area is outside the area built-up area boundary. The rural character and undeveloped nature of the countryside will be protected against inappropriate development. The proposal does not meet any of the criteria regarding agricultural, forestry or extraction of minerals, and it does not make for quiet, informal recreational use. This applicant site is a very sensitive area of the AONB. Any increase in noise or traffic would lead to loss of amenity for nearby residents.
Thank you. Did you capture that?
I could pass it over, we have it on recording, and I can say it again if anyone would like to.
Okay. All right, we've heard the motion put forward by Councillor Hodgman. All those in favour?
We have a seconder.
Sorry, apologies, I'm getting ahead of myself.
That's fine.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Skip. All those in favour of that motion? Okay, all those against? Any abstentions?
Okay, so we had 8 voting for, 6 against and 1 abstention. Therefore, it's been refused.
Therefore, it has... The alternative motion has been supported. Thank you. Okay, moving to the next. Are we okay on? Okay. Thank you. Moving on to the next agenda item number 10. This is the DC 231442 Coombe Cottage, Church Road, Mannings Heath. Could I ask the officer to present the application to committee, please?
So this application site comprises a detached house located in a large plot opposite the junction of Church Road and Woodlands Walk in Mannings Heath. Planning permission is sought for a 4-bedroom detached house within the side garden of the house. This is the proposed site layout. These are the floor plans and these are the elevations. On-site parking is proposed for a minimum of 2 cars at the frontage of the site for each dwelling, accessed via separate access points from Church Road. This is the current street scene, with the new house to be located roughly behind where the red car is parked. This is the site from within Coombe Cottage, and these are the other views of the side garden, Coombe Cottage, and the adjacent house to the north. The principle of 2 2-bed houses on the site has previously been accepted at appeal. This is a comparison of the site layout of the appeal scheme with the current proposal. And this is a comparison of the front elevations. The single dwelling now being proposed has a similar impact to the scheme allowed on appeal and would not harm the appearance of the street or the amenities of adjacent occupiers. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Not sure if Alan Pengelly is here. No? Okay. Owen Hydes, please.
Good evening, councillors. I am Owen Hydes, and I am the ex-chair of Nuthurst Parish Council. I'm very familiar with the history of Coombe Cottage site. The key demand of the parish's neighbourhood plan is for smaller homes. These are more affordable for younger people and help them to get on the housing ladder. Additionally, smaller homes enable older people to downsize so they can release their current larger homes. Horsham District Council needs these smaller homes. The whole nation needs them too, as politicians keep telling us. So far, there have been 10 applications at this site. The Parish Council has rightly not supported any applications for large executive type houses. And note well, councillors, the applicant currently sits on planning permission for a pair of 2 small semi-detached houses. Yet, what you have before you tonight is another application for a single large house. The officers have recommended planning permission because the district does not have a 5-year housing supply. They say this single large house would make a contribution to reduce this shortfall? Well, the applicant already has permission for 2 semis, and if he used it, this would make an even bigger contribution to reducing the housing shortfall. Using that planning permission would also support the parish council's neighbourhood plan for smaller houses, and also what virtually every politician is saying, that the country needs smaller and cheaper houses. Councillors, I'm therefore asking you to vote against this application so that we can get the small semi-detached houses we as a community and district actually want and need. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Barry Wells, please.
Thank you. I object to this application, and it's for 3 reasons. Firstly, the total abuse of the planning system. We have lived in Manningsea for over 40 years, and multiple times over the years, planning applications have been made once the original long-time owners passed away, typically for commercial gain, as opposed to developing the existing delightful cottage, namely Coombe Cottage. On every occasion there has been local objections, parish council rejection and Horsham District Council planning department rejection. However, on this occasion, either knowledge of how to manipulate the system by the applicant or advisors led to the planning inspectorate to become involved, who without any consultation gave approval. I have challenged such undemocratic behaviour with our local MP, who in turn made contact with the housing minister. I have copy correspondence. I have real sympathy for both the local parish council and for Horsham District Council planning personnel by way of such undemocratic behaviour. Secondly, the neighbourhood plan, which involved much of people's time when being prepared, made clear reference to the non-building of additional properties within gardens, which this application is for, squeezed in between 2 properties. It would be wrong to say it ruins the village appearance, but certainly takes away elements of its village appearance. My third point is the one which I'm so genuinely concerned about and appalled about. The dangerous positioning of this development. The photographs that indeed were shown up there, none showed the bend that this actual property is going to be developed on, if continued. And I have a picture here, although I was told not to bring any pictures, to highlight just in fact how dangerous this is. We live opposite this property. We're on the corner of Woodlands Walk, so we see exactly what's going on. It is almost right on the pinnacle of a dangerous bend. The photograph submitted with the original application was taken from the right-hand side of a left-hand bend, in turn creating the appearance of an almost straight road, and that's not playing fair with a planning application. It's cheating. It is also directly opposite a T-junction.
Sorry, could I ask you to bring your comments to conclusion, please?
Sorry?
Can I ask you to bring your comments to conclusion?
I will. I'm finished. I have made it clear with my previous objection to this development that should an accident occur, personal injury or worse, and minor accidents have already with 2 to 3 cars parked on that bend, that I will seek legal advice with regards whether accountability and subsequent damages could be claimed against the Highways Authority. And I notice that they've been commented on before tonight. Apart from a paper exercise, speak to the residents of Woodlands Walk, Forest Close, Limekiln Road and Heath Close, plus the bus companies, for their advice.
Could I ask you, are you finished?
I have finished.
Sorry, thank you very much.
Yes, if I can come back. A significant material planning consideration is the appeal scheme that was allowed on this site, which proposed access points in exactly the same position as you see them on the screen in front of you, with the one to the south serving Coombe Cottage and the one to the north serving 2 two-bedroom homes with increased levels of parking. So a 4-bedroom dwelling here would have a lesser impact, shall we say, on traffic movements in and out of the site. traffic, or cars should I say, can turn and exit in a forward gear. The County Highways Authority have commented in detail on page 145 of the report, investigating the visibility displays against manual for streets, and are satisfied that the arrangement is safe given the fact that cars can turn and exit in a forward gear. In respect to comments around the size of the dwelling and the neighbourhood plan, I'll refer you to page 148, 3 paragraphs relating to housing mix. Now, the Nothurst neighbourhood plan does not include a policy requiring small homes. It is an objective, though, of the plan which supports the provision of a mix of dwelling types, including particularly smaller dwellings. However, as this is not a policy requirement, officers' advice is that is not reason to refuse permission, the very fact that this is a 4-bedroom home. Equally, the very fact that there's an alternative scheme for 2 2-bedroom homes is not reason to refuse a scheme for 4-bedroom homes, 1 4-bedroom home. The application is to be determined on its own merits, not on the basis of whether there is a preferred scheme also which is extant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ward Councillor Livingstone.
Right, okay. So what we got here is an application approved 2 2-bedroom homes to 1 4-bedroom home. Now, the original approval, as already been mentioned, was given after an appeal. The inspector on the appeal for the 2 2-bedroom homes stated the proposal would add to the council's housing supply in Mannings Heath through the provision of 2 starter homes, home-type dwellings, that will be suitable for a range of households, that will be in easy reach of nearby Horsham for services and employment. So, the inspector approved it on the basis of 2 small dwellings, which complies with the objective, or a policy, with the objective of the Nuthurst neighbourhood plan. I also sat on that committee when the plan was drawn up. Now, the neighbourhood plan clearly states, as the objective, to provide a mix of dwelling types, including particularly smaller dwellings for young families and starter homes for younger people. Now, the reasoning for the officer's recommendation to accept this change seems to be simply, according to the report I've got in front of me, on the basis that the council is not currently able to determine a 5-year supply of housing. This change to an already approved application for 2 houses to become 1 house, I find difficult to equate in any way to a lack of housing supply in our district. So I would be interested in the opinion of other members of this committee at this time, and I would like to come back after the debate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Councillor Mercer, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I was also involved in the development of the Nuthurst neighbourhood plan, which was one of the first, in fact, it was the first, I think, improved in the district, and was very carefully put together after a very significant majority referendum. And the importance of the small dwellings was very much part of what residents agreed to. So this is very important to the neighbourhood. I also do not understand the logic of a paragraph which says that putting 1 house onto a site fulfills the issue around the scarcity of housing supply, but when that 1 house prevents the building of 2 houses for which there is already planning permission. And to me, I think that's a contradiction in terms, and I'm certainly prepared to support Councillor Livingstone in any alternative he wishes to put up.
I think we just need to be clear, members, that we cannot prefer one application over another. So it's not a case, you cannot give weight to the fact that if 1 is permitted, 2 can't be implemented. in plan you can't prefer something over the other. You have to consider, is this application acceptable in its own right? Now, the weight to the impact on our 5-year supply for one house and two house is something considered, but it's negligible, I would suggest. And where you've got a site which the inspector has said is reasonably sustainable, we are not being successful at appeal for the delivery of one house because our housing land supply is so low. So, you know, my view is, given the similarities of this application to the two in terms of its appearance, its highway impact, etc., given the appeal decision, given our 5-year housing land supply, it's just not, unfortunately, it's not an application that, in my view, we could successfully defend a refusal on. Thank you.
Councillor Vickers.
Yes, could you pop up the elevations again, because I think they looked incredibly similar, the one of the two houses and the one of the single house. The actual design or the impact is incredibly similar, and I think I was right in hearing that the impact on the highway would be less significant from one house than it would with two houses, so there'd be less movement of traffic and cars going in and out. I can't see any reason to refuse it at all. I will be supporting the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to comment? Councillor Hogman.
I've never seen this reason for coming back to committee on here before. Ultraverses, am I pronouncing that right? Ultravirus? You've enlightened me. Similar, we've had lots of similar items to this in the past when the principle of development has already been agreed on the site. You know, whilst we are minded and really want to turn it down and want to say no, every officer that sat at the front before in similar applications has told us that the principle of development has already been allowed on the site. And similar to Councillor Vickers, I'm looking at the ridge heights, I'm looking at the size, the scale, the mass. I don't see that there's anything. You know, I would like to support the local members. I hear what Mr. Hyde has said and the local members have said, and I really would like to support them. But I just think we'd lose on appeal and we'd possibly get costs. And it does look like this applicant has already been slightly messed around. And but obviously that's by the by. But I would like to support the applicants, but I feel my hands are tied like Councillor Vickers. I just think this would go through on appeal. The principle of development has already been agreed on the site. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Grant.
Having listened very carefully to fellow councillors, I was at the beginning of this, I was minded very much like Councillor Hogman over there, but I've changed my mind. I think that it's actually important for us to support any motion that Councillor Livingstone might put forward and test the planning system on this, because as a principle, we as councillors have been debating amongst ourselves time and time again about land supply, about the need for smaller houses, lower cost houses. And if we're going to be constantly put on the back foot, I think as a matter of principle it's something we should do. I understand the issue, we have to approve a planning application that's put to us on the merits of that specific application. Get that totally, but in this specific and limited application, I will certainly consider to support Councillor Livingstone in any motion he might want to put forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Grant, there's two things that members should note. As my colleague said, there's no specific policy which we could hook on to refuse an application because it doesn't deliver small homes. Obviously, when you've got much larger developments, you would expect a mix of dwellings. When you've got one sole house, I think it's not a reason refusal that can be substantiated in officers' view. And in terms of Councillor Grant's point, I think our 5-year housing land supply has been tested quite a lot of times, and I think we've lost. And obviously that's why we're progressing our local plan at pace, because when that's adopted, we will have a 5-year housing land supply and we will be able to resist speculative development. I think it's an unreasonable decision to say, let's test it, bearing in mind where we are, what our annual monitoring report says, where we are with our local plan, how many appeals we've lost on 5-year supply. So whilst I acknowledge the sentiment, and that's why we're progressing the local plan at pace, we have to consider it in accordance with the policy constraints that we are in now. We've got a 2.9 year supply of housing land supply. In policy terms, that's dire. So, you know, we can't substantiate a reason for refusal on those grounds. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nunn, did you have your hand up?
I did, although I think it was more or less in far better words what I would have said. I totally, obviously, you know, we want more affordable housing, and smaller houses is a way to deliver that. Absolutely, 100% agree with that. You know, so many times over. But the fact is that, you know, what we're looking at here is. This was approved as appeal because of our lack of 5-year land supply. It wasn't specifically because it was 2 houses rather than 1. If it had been 1 house then, they would have approved that as well, for the same reason, our lack of a 5-year land supply. The number of houses would not have affected that decision. So, you know, I have to agree with officers that our chances would be appealed. We appealed it last time, and our chances of sustaining that appeal would be very, very small. And so we'd still get the house, and we just get a fine along with it. So it does not seem a reasonable or, you know, regrettably a plausible way to go ahead. So I support the
Thank you.
motion.
Any final question before I go back to Councillor Livingstone? Okay, Councillor Livingstone.
Okay. Now, remember why the approval went through last time from the inspector, right? And he made it specifically stated it was 2 starter home type dwellings that would be suitable for a range of households that would be an easy reach and nearby Horsham for services and employment. Now, 2 is more than 1 to me. Now, that negates the whole 5-year plan as far as I'm concerned. Now, fellow members, I'm sure we all recognise that we need to have smaller houses, as we've stated. For my ward, having yet another large property, I consider, you know, for this site, to be wrong. And it would restrict young families coming into the village, and possibly also older residents of one. And it would restrict me from downsizing and staying in the area, you know, we all love. The neighbourhood plan was developed with local residents. I sat on the committee, took a great deal of time and effort, as Councillor Mercer has stated, and we are justifiably proud of it, as it was one of the first, if not the first, to be made in Horsham District. Now, if we're looking just for a policy, an objective, when I'm writing strategies, sits above policies, right? An objective is we wanted smaller houses. When we did this neighbourhood plan, the community came together and we were very much behind this objective of having the smaller houses. We wanted somewhere where, you know, people could move into, older people could downsize. So, from my point of view, having produced this neighbourhood plan, I see no reason to not maintain its integrity and put into action the community's wishes. So I'm still minded to vote against this application, even after all information supplied by the officers. And it's basically on the fact 2 is more than 1, and we're taking an extra house away out of the 5-year, this 5-year housing allocation. So that's how I am. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
I'll just make some final points here, members. The planning system doesn't operate in the manner of a beauty parade. We must consider each application on its own merits, and whilst you might prefer one that has been previously granted, that is not reason to refuse the application in front of you. If you wish to refuse it, you must hook it off the back of a policy. There is no policy in the Nuthurst neighbourhood plan that relates to housing sizes. It is an objective, an aim set out in pretext to the neighbourhood plan itself. So in that respect, my advice, and our advice strongly as you've heard, is that there is no policy grounds to refuse this application simply because it's a 4-bedroom house as opposed to a previous scheme for 2-bedroom houses. Thank you.
One final question.
Just coming back to the officer's point there, if there's no grounds to object to this planning application, why is it at committee?
Because our constitution allows applications to be called to committee by various means, and one of those means was, Councillor Livingstone called it in, so it's here before us. All members have a right to call it to committee, so, but.
Democracy.
Yeah.
Okay, I am going to go to the vote on this, and the recommendation is this application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions as listed in the committee report. Therefore, I propose that all those for this application?
Yeah.
All those against? Okay. Any abstentions?
Okay, so we have 10 voting for, 5 against, 1 abstention. Therefore, permission has been approved. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 11. This is TPO 1566, land at Bashurst Hill, Itchingfield. Could I ask the officer to present, please?
So consent is sought to confirm a provisional tree preservation order served on a large parcel of woodland at Bashurst Copse on the 22nd of January this year. The provisional TPO expires on the 22nd of June. This is an aerial photograph of the woodland. The woodland is considered to be of high amenity value in the surrounding area, with a large part comprising ancient woodland. The reason for serving the provisional TPO was owing to a credible threat to the woodland posed by the marketing of the site for sale both as a single entity and as a series of lots as shown here. Accordingly, it is recommended that the tree preservation order be confirmed as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I invite, and forgive me if I mispronounce your name, Bernard Hornung?
Chairman, officers and councillors, thank you for leave to speak. Ancient trees and woodlands are an important part of our natural heritage and are irreplaceable. The government has made significant commitments to establish new trees and woodlands across the country, and this is a welcome initiative to attempt to correct the mistakes of the past. However, it is no less important to preserve what we have now, our own health and well-being. The government increased protection of ancient woodland, ancient and veteran trees in the planning system by amending the National Planning Policy Framework in 2012 and again in 2018. The National Planning Policy Framework outlines development that results in the loss or deterioration of irreplaceable habitats, such as ancient woodlands, ancient and veteran trees, should be refused unless there are wholly exceptional reasons and a suitable compensation strategy exists. This includes any area of ancient, semi-natural woodland, mainly made up of trees and shrubs, native to the site, usually arising from natural regeneration. It also includes plantations on ancient woodland and sites replanted with conifer or broadleaf trees that retain ancient woodland features such as undisturbed soil, ground flora and fungi. Should any planning application come forward, I believe it should be refused. The development in this case will result in deterioration and loss of ancient woodland and ancient and veteran trees. As you know well, how to assess a planning application when there are ancient woodlands, ancient trees or veteran trees on or near to a proposed development site was published by Natural England and the Forestry Commission on the 14th of January 2022. I also believe that any proposed compensation measures should not be considered as part of an assessment of the merits of any development proposal. There are more homes for sale in the United Kingdom today than at any other point in the last 8 years. In the meantime, and to avoid any proactive and facilitative clearance works, the only tool we have available to us and the best deterrent to preserve this important site is for a tree preservation order to be agreed on the complete site. I therefore request this meeting to give its support to your Horsham District Council officers to confirm Tree Preservation Order 1566.
Thank you very much. Dr. Vanessa Hetherington, please.
Chairman, councillors, thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. The Planning Committee report advises that the woodland as a whole may be under threat from the risk of clearance works in support of potential development activity within the wood, and that such an action would result in a significant loss and harm to the character and amenities of the locality, and it would therefore be appropriate to proactively confirm the order and make it permanent as a precaution. Ancient woodland is an irreplaceable habitat, which now sadly covers less than 3% of England's landmass. The greater part of the woodland within the subject TPO is designated ancient woodland in Natural England's Ancient Woodland Inventory, and the smaller part is designated by Natural England as a priority habitat, deciduous woodland. All of the area included within the order, even the parts that have not been designated as ancient woodland, are included within Natural England's National Habitat Network, and are present on every edition of the Ordnance Survey maps of the area as far back as 1875 and on the 1839 Itchingfield Parish Tithe map. The Council's Arboricultural and Ecology officers, when they visited the site on the 4th of April, found there several ancient woodland indicator plants. The officers considered that the presence of these plants supports the view that the woodland has historically been and still is an ancient woodland. The Planning Committee report advises that, when viewed from the footpath, the woodland is readily visible, and as such it makes a significant and positive contribution to the rural wooded character and appearance of the area. For this reason, it is considered to be of high amenity value when viewed within the local landscape context. Destruction of the woodland would have a significant negative impact not only on the character and amenities of the locality, but also on the wildlife and priority and protected species that are resident there. It would also create a destructive precedent nationally. The TPO is urgently needed to protect this precious woodland and habitat. Please approve the TPO. Thank you.
Thank you. Nigel Fretwell, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman and councillors. We're joined today in the room by some of the 32 households who have written in support of this TPO. I understand there's just one objection. And there's some important context here that supports what my fellow neighbours have talked about. The owners of this land exchanged contracts to sell it last December to a company called Strategic Holdings 6 Limited. The deal was done on a deferred completion basis. Strategic Holdings appear to be associated with Strategic Farm and Land. They state online that they are a specialist land investment company who purchase land without planning permission, but which hold long-term potential for future development. Strategic Holdings is now trying to sell that land so they can complete the deal with the owners and make a significant profit. The legal documents show two overages in place, one for 20 years for the original owners and one for 80 years for Strategic Holdings. This evidences that both parties are looking to benefit from future development of this land in line with their objection letter to the TPO. The land was originally marketed as one plot, but has subsequently, as we've seen, been marketed as a subdivided plot of 14 parcels of land and as 4 plots. It's been marketed and auctioned through multiple agents. The asking price has been as high as £70,000 per acre, when woodland is only marketed at around £15,000 per acre. There is no way anybody would buy this land at that cost without the intent to develop. In April, solicitors for Strategic Holdings served notices on 14 neighbours that stated, as a result of your actions, we are instructed that our client will suffer at least £250,000 in damages, and advising us that unless we sign a letter within 26 hours, confirming that, amongst other things, we will not provide further information regarding the land to any third party, they will commence legal action against us. This would have prevented us from talking to you today. This letter was upsetting, intimidatory, and threatening. The sole intention here is to do anything to maximise profit and sell this land on the basis of development with no care for preserving the land in its current state. Please confirm this TPO.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Utah.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I don't think there's any chance whatsoever that these developers will get their own way. It's a TPO across the whole area. Ancient woodland is fast diminishing due to people exactly like the prospective developer. I would really like to enforce the TPO for however long we're allowed to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Greenwood.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a beautiful area of ancient woodland. It's covered in bluebells in the spring. We've got a footpath going through that's used by neighbouring residents and locals. It's a really valuable amenity and really peaceful area that it just deserves protection. So I fully support the TPO, as Councillor Utan said, for as long as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Mercer, yes.
Can I suggest we move to a vote, Chairman?
Sorry, I missed that.
Can I suggest we move to a vote?
I think most of us. Anybody desperate to speak before we go to a vote? No. So the yep.
Can you just tell me how long we can actually enforce a TPO for?
It's in perpetuity as far as we're aware, yes.
So that's what we'll
Yeah.
do, yes?
You can only have it removed.
All right, we'll move to a vote on this. The recommendation that the tree preservation order 1566, Bashurst Copse, Woodland to the east of Furwood House, Idgenfield, be confirmed. All those in favour, please raise your arms. Okay. Thank you. That was unanimous. Thank you. I don't have any urgent business, but I would just like to thank members for our participation this evening. Sorry, I'm still in the meeting. Our participation this evening and the excellent contribution from the officers as always. Thank you. And thank the members of the public for their patience, having sat there for 3 hours. Thank you. Excuse me, members, could you please bring your crockery over to the table? If you can carry your microphone.